Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, August 26, 2020. May we please have roll call?
Chair Clark.
Here.
Vice Chair McGill.
Here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
You.
Commissioner Longstreet. Commissioner Martinez Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Okay, and I guess we'll have Commissioner Perry check in when he arrives. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Chair Clark, no, we don't.
Okay, great. Any written communications?
None.
Okay. We've come to public comment. I believe, Rose, you will be explaining how that's going to work today. Unmute.
I am sorry. For those who wish to speak during public comment, please use the raise your hand functionality in the GoToWebinar control panel. We are currently displaying a graphic showing where that is located. When I call on you, please unmute yourself and then speak for a maximum of 2 minutes. For those who wish to speak on an agenda item later in the meeting, please raise your hand when the item is under discussion.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with Commissioner Committee assignment reports, and I'm going to start with Ms. Martinez Cohen.
Hello, yes, I did attend here, let me turn my camera on. I did attend the Creeks Division had their first virtual meeting last week on Wednesday, and they were going over the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance regarding water quality. And there was quite a few public comments on that. And I believe what they have adopted is a really good policy. And so they will be meeting again regularly, back on the regular schedule on the virtual format going forward on the second Wednesday of the month.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker.
The Golf Advisory Committee did meet again. They're making way with the virtual meetings, and it's successful. So July, the golf course had some growth. I mean, it's one of the many activities that we can do to be outside and just enjoy the not so hot weather when it's not hot. The revenue was doing well. Their expected growth without the specials, I mean, they've had enough traffic there to, stimulate more revenue, which is good. They are adding more color to the course, slowly but surely. So aside from the greens, if you hit it off the greens, you're going to get some color to see. So everything else is good at the golf course.
Thank you. Commissioner Vice Chair McGill.
There we go. So the Park Foundation had its first virtual meeting last week. We reviewed several months of financials and did one approval, but not surprisingly, it's been a fairly quiet period. So mostly we caught up with events.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Perry, I'm not sure if you're with us yet, so I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Feel free to turn your webcam on when you do arrive so we can acknowledge your presence. This month, I too attended the park virtual meeting for the first half of it. Thank you, Commissioner Vice Chair McGill, for presenting on that. I did attend the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting where we discussed each tree that is on the agenda for removal today. We'll go into further details when we get to those items. Also, I, on Wednesdays, have been attending the Santa Barbara Creeks, has a great Facebook site on Wednesdays where you can log into Facebook, go to their page, and do the activities they're doing. A Creek Week is coming up, so please go to their Facebook page, check out the Creek Week activities. They even have a cross-stitch pattern you can do that shows like local sceneries of creeks. They have educational videos on. I really encourage people to go to the Creeks Facebook page and check that out. And I think that brings us to the end of our Commissioner Committee assignment reports. And do we have any? Commissioner Perry? Oh, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. I'm sorry, because I can't see you guys. It's hard to remember to call on everybody.
No problem. I attended the youth council meeting last week, and they're starting back up for this school year, and we'll be discussing possible virtual activities in the next couple months.
Thank you, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. And with that, we'll go to Commission and Staff Communications if we have any.
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any service award pins to discuss today?
Chair Clark, Commissioners, yes, we do. We had 3 staff in our department get recognized by the city administrator at the August 4th City Council meeting. The first one is Jerry Holcomb, who's a grounds maintenance worker in our Parks Division. Jerry actually also worked at the airport department, so he's actually a new addition to Parks and Recreation through one of our recent recruitments, so we're very pleased to have him. And then for 15 years, we have 2 staff that are recognized. The first one is Tim Burgess in the Creeks Division. He is currently an associate planner. But I'd like to just give you a little bit of background. Tim started in the department as water quality, creek enforcement officer, water quality tester, you name it. And he's really grown in his position and taken on new assignments. Tim not only does some of the restoration projects, habitat work that we're doing, recent project is at Hidden Valley, but he also is part of the stormwater plan review team for land development. And he does a number of other things for the department, for the division and department. And then Jill Murray, who is our water quality research analyst, 15 years as well for service to the city and in the Creeks Division that entire time. And Jill has really spearheaded our water quality research programs on many, many different levels. And she's a huge asset to the city and the department because she brings her scientific rigor and knowledge and expertise and dedication to solving our creek and ocean water quality problems. That's it.
Thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Holcomb. We're lucky to have you. And then for Tim and Jill, I know them both personally and professionally, and I think they're just outstanding human beings. And I'm full of gratitude for the work that they're doing for our community. So thank you, Tim and Jill. That brings us to the summary of council actions. Did anybody have any questions? I had one. Oh, Vice Chair McGill.
You're welcome to go first.
Oh, no, go ahead. You first.
No, I was just curious. I was looking at items 4 and 5, which are basically contracts for youth surf and beach. And I was just wondering what the difference is or why the difference is between the compensation of 65% and 90%.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, it depends on the type of service, delivery service. So for example, number 4, the youth surf and beach camps, it has to do with the actual use of facilities and city facilities, whereas on number 5, iSurf, our arrangement with them essentially is to market their program, and they carry out their program independent of needing any of our facilities.
Okay, thanks.
And I would add, this is a unique, these are unique numbers because we entered into contractual agreements with these service providers, and they were able to extend their summer programs. So that's why we went to council to extend their contractual agreement with the city, because they're able to provide more summer camp services than we initially anticipated they would be able to provide.
Good. Yeah,
Wonderful.
thanks.
Yeah, and much needed services. Regarding number 1, I was excited to see that there's going to be some more coastal interpretive signage, and I was wondering where those signs will be going.
Sure, Chair Clark and Commissioners, these are signs that will be located in coastal parks. So starting at Mesa Lane Steps and extending eastward to the Bird Refuge. In terms of different, it's taking forward some initiatives that we've had for some time to put in some interpretive signs, and it'll mesh with our walking map, our coastal walking map. The Santa Barbara County Trails Council secured those funds, and they have transferred them to us, but we'll be working closely with the sign design and content that we do with them. So we're happy to have the funds, because it's not something we ever had really budget for.
Right. Well, thank you for getting them in grant funding. That's wonderful. The only other comment that I had to make was that I appreciate City Council upholding the Parks and Rec Commission decision about the tree on Gillespie Street. I received a lot of positive feedback from community members who had been invested in the item. So that's all I have to communicate. Does anybody else on the commission have any questions regarding the council actions? Okay, so the minutes.
Chair Clark, I just wanted to mention, Roger, I believe, has joined the meeting. Roger, please show your webcam.
I'm present.
Could you show your webcam, please?
It's on.
You're not showing up, so.
Share my view. There I am.
There you are. Perfect. Okay, thank you. We just need to make sure it works. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Okay. Did Commissioner Perry, did you have anything to report on the Commissioner Committee assignment reports? I'm not sure that your committee met this month.
The committee has not met, but I did run into the chairman, and they are getting geared up, and hopefully we'll start by Labor Day.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to the minutes. Did anybody want to make a motion to waive the reading and approve the minutes? Okay, I'll make a motion to waive. Yes, Commissioner Perry.
Yes, motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
And that was Vice
Aye.
Chairman Gill?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so moved. Commissioner Perry, it's only necessary to have your webcam on when you're speaking or voting anything other than aye. Thank you. That brings us to our Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations. I'd like to welcome Mr. Slack.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. I seem to be getting a bit of lag on the screen. Sorry about that. The presentation, wait for the presentation to queue up real quick. Excellent. You can advance to the next slide. The first Street Tree Advisory recommendation for review is located at 501 Niños Drive. It's also known as Dwight Murphy Field. The applicant is requesting the removal of 38 various trees from within the park. The applicant for this project is the Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department. The removals are being requested as part of really extensive and exciting park renovations. In addition to the proposal to remove the 38 trees, There is the intent to plant 125 new trees. And I did want to quickly mention that on the initial application, we indicated 39 removals, but during site review, found a really valuable Quinto palm that was located in front of the bathroom that we've decided to retain on site as part of the new proposed planting. So the quantity's been reduced from 39 to 38. Given the significant site improvements, I'm going to invite Jill, Ms. Zachary back to do a presentation on the proposed site improvements for Dwight Murphy Field.
Welcome.
Chair Clark and commissioners, could we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Excellent, thank you. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time walking you back through this project. The commission's been involved in reviewing it since we started the process back in 2018. Where we are right now is in the process of developing the preliminary design plans, which we completed those and went to the ABR, and we'll be submitting the plans for this through the city's development application review process. Once we complete that, we'll be going to the Planning Commission. We'll also be coming back to the Parks and Recreation Commission so that you can make findings on the project. And since that might be a little bit of time, I thought I could walk through where we are. We've been working diligently for the last 6 months with RRM and the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation to advance project design based on the master plan. So this slide gives you the overview. It's very familiar to you. We haven't changed much in terms of the layout. Everything's just gotten a little bit more refined. And just as a review, part of the plan includes turning what is currently a park road but used as a street into a one-way street. So if you see, I think my cursor shows up on your screen, from the zoo entry all the way to where the connection is with Pueblo will be one way. And that allows us to create more parking, which will help serve the park. As you can see, we are still proposing a multi-sport synthetic turf field, a natural youth baseball area, and then this brightly colored location over here is where the Gwendolyn Strong all-inclusive playground will go. We are also keeping the fitness zone that we have at the park. We're just moving it to a new location, and this is where it is. I want to show you a few slides to give you some views, because we are proposing to remove 38 trees and plant 125 new trees, and to give you a sense of what the views, or what we anticipate the views will look like. Could I have the next slide, please? So this gives you the bird's eye view of the park and the project when it's complete, and it gives you a sense of some of the tree canopy and coverage that we'll have along Niños Drive, in the parking lot area, and then also along Pueblo. Next slide, please. And then this gives you a sense of looking at, this is kind of a family gathering area. There'll be bike racks when people enter the park and want to use the open space grassy area, or there's youth baseball going on. That's the view they'll have. And then also the pathway that leads to the playground. Next slide, please. And then, as Mr. Slack indicated in the beginning of the presentation, the need for the tree removals is largely due to the demolition work that we need to do to build the project. So it gives you a sense of everything you see sort of cross-hatched, in part is hardscape, and where we're putting in the new parking area. And then this area is where we're actually retaining trees. And then along Port Lamar, it's hard to see here, but there's a lot of grading that has to occur along this length of Port Lamar. And in order to achieve that grading work, the trees that are along this area do need to be removed. That said, as you can see from the overview, we're planning to replant them. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So this gives you kind of a sense of the preliminary landscape plan and where trees will be planted. So there's trees along the pathway between the multi-purpose synthetic field, the youth baseball field, trees that would line the field here, and then additional trees throughout. And as you can see, there's a lot more landscaping and trees as you're in and around the playground area, and then trees that will line Pueblo as well. And I think we have one more slide, which gives you the preliminary tree plan. And so that just takes off the rest of the landscaping and focuses where we will have tree canopy. Ultimately, although the application said a total of 161 trees, I redid the math just now, and it's 163 trees. So we'll go from 75 to 163 on site. So that's more than double the number of trees that we currently have there. And as we know from site visits and passing through there, we could use some more trees in certain areas. They just need to be in the right location, and they need to both provide shade and also accent to the park, provide other aesthetic benefits, and then obviously in keeping with our goals for urban forest management and increase the canopy that we have throughout the city. And that's all I wanted to share with you. It'll be a little bit before the commission sees this project again, but hopefully we'll be coming forward soon asking you to make findings that we can take to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
So just to recap, the department's proposing the removal of 38 trees. We presented the item to the Street Tree Advisory Committee. They reviewed the project in full scope. After review, noted that the proposed improvements made practical sense. There were a couple additional comments. The stone pine that's located near the restroom was found to be of specimen value, and there was intent comments made about potential retention of that tree if it's possible. So they made a comment to direct staff to work with the project landscape architect to see if it was possible to be retained as part of the site improvements. There's lots of details that are yet to be known about grading and the feasibility of retaining that tree, but we're going to work with the project team to see if that is feasible. And an additional comment that the committee made was to incorporate the use of cork oak into the plant palette. There's a few really nice cork oaks located along Pueblo. Those specific trees have done really well. As Ms. Zachary noted, there's significant grading and construction there that necessitate the removal of the existing cork oaks. But based on their performance, the committee commented that they would like to see the incorporation of cork oak into the planting palette for the newly proposed tree species. So after review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the project as proposed, with the comments about retention of the stone pine if possible and the incorporation of cork oak into the proposed planting palette for the new trees within the park.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. We have questions for Mr. Slack or Ms. Zachary. If there are no specific questions from the commission, I would like to invite members of the public to comment at this time. Ms. Navarez, do we have anybody waiting to speak to this particular item?
Anyone who wishes to speak on this item, please raise your hand on the GoToWebinar control panel. Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay. I have a couple of comments. You know, I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting on this item, and they are a tough group to approve tree removals because they are very invested in our urban forest and our community and the greater good, and they were 100% for this. I love the net 128 trees. I love the increase in the urban forest. I'll be sad to see those 38 trees go, but I'll be elated to see 128 come in. So I have no reservations about these tree removals. Did anybody else have something to say? If not,
I would just like,
Perry, please show your webcam.
am I there? No, I just lost
Yeah,
it.
you're there. We see you.
Will there be a backstop to accommodate the softball field? It's not in any of the renditions.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, yes, it'll be a backstop that'll support the youth baseball activities that occur there.
Vice Chair McGill.
Yeah, I mean, having walked it, it was a little painful to see all the trees disappearing in Port Lamar. I'm assuming that cork oaks are not transplantable, or you would do it. And I definitely concur with the comments on the stone pine. That tree actually stood out amongst its peers.
I could, Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, there was brief conversations about the possibility of transplanting the cork oaks. There's certainly a size that would lend itself to transplanting, but given their orientation on the slope, it would make it nearly impossible to try to preserve enough of the root system. When trees develop on the slope, they have a tendency to like sort of optimize the root system. So most of the roots are probably growing back up under towards the roadside as well, which would make transplanting even more difficult.
That's what I guessed.
All right.
Are we ready for a motion?
We are ready for a motion.
Okay, I will move that we approve the recommendation for the removal of the 38 various species trees in Dwight Murphy Field to be replanted as part of the project with 125 new trees.
Would you like to add into your comments that you would support the retention of the stone pine is feasible?
Yes, I would like to add that very much. And that it is a reasonable and practical development of the property on which the trees are located.
I believe because they're street trees, we don't have to put in a finding.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, my mistake.
But I agree with your intent. I'll second that. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Could we advance to the next slide, please? The next Street Tree Advisory Committee item for review is the request for the removal of a Mexican fan palm located within the front setback at 221 and 225 West Pueblo Street. The request is being made by the applicant as part of facade renovations as well as the installation of an ADA ramp for this medical office building. The committee reviewed the application. And it's worth noting that on the application, the applicant proposed the removal of the Mexican fan palm with the proposal to replace it with 3 king palms. The committee had performed a site visit, reviewed the application, and had discussion revolving the Mexican fan palm. It was a bit of a tough decision because the Mexican fan palm in its existing condition is in good health. There were concerns about its ability to be retained with the installation and reconfiguration of the entrance and the ADA accessible ramp. And after review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal of the Mexican fan palm with the condition that the applicant plant the 3 proposed king palms that were proposed on the initial application. During review of the item, the committee determined that the commission could make the finding that a reasonable and practical development of the property on which the tree is located required its removal, as well as that the character of the immediate neighborhood with respect to reforestation will not be materially affected by the proposed removal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Mr. Slack, will the king palms achieve the same height and girth as the Mexican fan palm?
Chair Clark and commissioners, the king palm has, I think, a mature height of up to 50 feet. It's common in Santa Barbara to not see them that large. There are examples where they can be that large. as many of you probably know, Mexican fan palm, is a true skyline tree and can grow to, really significant heights. The committee during the discussion felt that the sort of the net benefit of 3 trees as opposed to the existing Mexican fan palm really kind of pushed the decision making towards the removal, feeling that there was more benefit gained to the community by the planting of the 3 king palms in lieu of the Mexican fan palm. In relation to diameter of stems, the Mexican fan palm is probably a little larger. Stems of palms don't really change much over time. So there would be a little bit of a difference, but in terms of softening the facade of the building and just the immediate character of the neighborhood, there will be more benefit to the king palms that are planted. They're proposing varied heights of the existing 3 king or the newly proposed king palms as well. So there will be coming in at various heights, I think of 8, 10, and 12 feet in height as proposed as part of the project.
Thank you. Are there more questions? Okay. I will make a motion to approve the removal of the Mexican fan palm at 225 West Pueblo Street, based on the condition that it is replaced with 3 king palms. And the findings that
sorry, no, I was just going to say I was going to second, but I thought you were finished. I apologize, but I was wondering, do we need to invite comment?
Oh, Barry, thank you for the catch. Ms. Navarez, do we have any public comment?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay. So taking up where I left off, just we'll base this on the findings that it's reasonable and practical development of the property. And as well, the character of the immediate neighborhood will not be materialistically affected by the removal of the Mexican fan palm.
I'll second it.
Is there a second? Okay. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved.
Next slide. Oh, excellent. The next item for review is the request for the removal of an evergreen pear located within the front setback at 10 East Quinto Street. The applicant is requesting the removal of the evergreen pear simply because the front yard has several existing trees. There's a evergreen pear to the front of the tree and a coast live oak directly behind this tree. And the applicant feels that by removing this evergreen pear that's located between the 2 other existing trees, that it'll allow for the other existing evergreen pear and the coast live oak to perform much better. The committee reviewed the applicant's application, performed a site visit, and after discussion, made a motion to approve the removal of the evergreen pear at 10 East Quinto Street. There were no conditions for replacement for this specific request, given that the property already has several trees and they felt that the removal would be of benefit to the existing trees on the property. During the review, the committee determined that the commission could make the finding that principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal.
Thank you. Are there questions? Mr. Sec, if I'm remembering correctly, did we see a couple of properties last year that had evergreen pears with some kind of blight or disease on them that's difficult to eradicate? Or am I just imagining it in my head?
Chair Clark and commissioners, that's correct. I believe it was on South Ontario where we really kind of dove into the issue.
Right.
It's commonly referred to as fire blight. It can be found on almost every evergreen pear in town. We would commonly refer to it as a cosmetic issue where it does cause, some dead leaves and it can kill small twigs, but rarely, if ever, is a detriment to the actual tree. It's more of just makes them look a little funky periodically, but can be pruned out and managed.
I was wondering if by removing the particular evergreen pear in question that's suppressing the growth of the other trees, it would contribute to the remaining evergreen pear's health such that it might be able to combat the blight more effectively.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think the bacteria that causes the bacteria that causes the fire blight is so prevalent in the community that I don't think the removal of this specific tree would have a profound impact on that component of the tree's health. But certainly the removal will give it much more space and allow it to kind of develop, because it's a much nicer specimen than the smaller tree that's being suppressed currently by the other evergreen pear.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Slack? Because if not, I would entertain a motion. Okay, it's hard to know if people are about to speak with this lag time that we're experiencing.
I'm happy to make a motion. I would just double check that there's no public comment. Yeah.
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands. There are no raised hands.
Okay.
Okay, then I will move that we approve the recommendation for the removal of the evergreen pear at 10 East Quinto Street, with the finding that the principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. That brings us to Cliff Drive.
So the next street tree item, or Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next street tree advisory committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a Norfolk Island pine located within the front setback at 1114 Cliff Drive. The applicant's requesting the removal of the tree due to safety concerns. There is general concern about the tree's proximity to the power lines that occur along Cliff Drive. In addition to those concerns, there were also concerns noted about the house's foundation, damage to the flagstone walking path located directly behind the tree, as well as concerns with infrastructure such as water and gas service to the property. The committee reviewed the application, performed a site visit, and during review, also had discussion with the applicant, who called in to explain the goals and the rationale for the removal request. There were no true safety related issues. There was not a supplemental arborist report or something that spoke to the tree's hazardous nature. It did appear to be in good health. There was uprising of the flagstone walkway, but these are simply flagstones that are sitting on the ground. There was no true documented evidence of damage to the house's foundation, and there were no issues with the water and gas service that occur, in near proximity to the tree. Ultimately, after review, the committee recommended denial of the Norfolk Island pine within the setback, stating that no findings pursuant to 15.24.090 fit the circumstances of this request.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the commission? Mr. Slack, how does it work if I see that it says if Southern California Edison felt the tree was a threat, they would notify the resident. Is that how it works when Edison is out and pruning their trees and evaluating lines? They give notice for every tree that they believe is endangering a structure or a person?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, essentially that's correct. I think that each situation can vary depending on the condition of the existing tree. It can be that Edison would take action on the tree if they felt it was truly a threat to the system. The applicant did contact Southern California Edison before she submitted an application to the department, and they did perform some light pruning on it. So that what they did is they reduced some branches on the street side of the tree to create a little bit of distance between the utility lines and the tree canopy. But again, if they felt that there was significant issue, they would either take action on the tree or issue a notice to the homeowner that they felt that the tree needed to be removed. And a lot of times they facilitate those removals.
Oh, okay. Vice Chairman Gill?
My question was actually answered. It was who notched the tree to get it away from the lines.
Oh, great. Are there other questions for Mr. Slack? Do we have anybody from the public who would like to speak to this particular tree?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. I do have one other question. Maybe it's to the recommendation. The without prejudice portion of the recommendation. I know that we have used that in the past when there's a key piece of missing information that could be provided. I'm not really seeing that here. So I was wondering what the committee's rationale is for the without prejudice.
Chair Clark and Commissioner
They felt what? Please, Mr. Slack.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I think the committee during discussion with the applicant wanted to leave the door open if the applicant wanted to pursue an arborist report or do more exploratory work to try to sort of drill down and prove some of the rationale on the initial application. So they made that recommendation to deny without prejudice to give her the opportunity if she so chose to, you know, hire an arborist and see if there really were safety concerns related to the tree.
Okay, thanks.
They were being cognizant of the fact that, you know, she in good faith believes that her property or person are in danger, and like Mr. Slack said, wanted to give her a chance to look into that further and not cause her to pay another permitting fee if she had additional evidence to present. Are there further questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion. I'll make a motion to deny the setback tree removal request at 1114 Cliff Drive on the Norfolk Island Pine. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Was that a nay? I heard a lag voice and I wasn't sure if that was a late aye or an early nay. Okay, so moved. Step. I'm not, I can't hear you, Mr. Slack.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next street tree advisory item for review is the request for co-designation for the 1,000 to 1,900 blocks of Chino Street. The existing species designation is red flowering gum, and this request for co-designation is part of staff's continued effort to provide improvements, also create additional opportunities for diversity and allow for staff flexibility for replanting options. The existing designation of red flowering gum, it's a tree that can achieve an extremely large size, causes lots of hardscape damage, and can arguably be much too large for the planting width of the parkway along this stretch of Chino Street. It also is a difficult tree for us from a maintenance perspective. and also difficult to find within the nursery industry. It's one of these species that's kind of fallen out of favor and just isn't able to be located as frequently. The committee reviewed the existing designation, the available rooting volume and parkway width that occurred along Chino Street, and after review made a recommendation to co-designate African tulip tree and desert willow for the 1,000 to 1,900 blocks of Chino Street.
Great. Do we have questions for Mr. Slack? Okay, do we have any public comment?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion. I'll make a motion to recommend that the commission approve African tulip tree and desert willow as code designations for the 1,000 to 1,900 blocks of Chino Street.
Second.
Wonderful. Do we have any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is also the request for co-designation occurring on the 0 and 100 blocks of North Alisos Street. The existing designation is red oak, which is performing really well on the street. It's a species that is similar to the red flowering gum, very difficult to locate. We've had a lot of grassroots effort in this particular part of town to replace some trees, and the inavailability to find the red oak has made it very difficult to provide those planting opportunities for residents that have been requesting new street trees. So the committee reviewed the 0 to 100 blocks of North Alisos Street, and after review made the recommendation to co-designate blue oak, cork oak, as well as island oak for use on the 0 to 100 blocks of North Alisos Street.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. I will move that we approve the recommendation to co-designate blue oak, cork oak, and island oak along the 0 to 100 blocks of North Alisos Street.
Second.
Second that.
I think did I skip over public comment yet again?
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Nevers, do we have anybody who has something to say from the public about these?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Thank you. And we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Thank you. So moved. Mr. Slack, before you go, I have an, oh, darn it. It was off topic. It was just an oak tree question, but I'll ask, hi. I was in a beach parking lot this morning and there's a line of oaks along the backside of the long parking lot at Hendry's Beach by the restoration work you did down there. But there was every oak tree had threads with worms hanging off of them, with a curtain of worms. What were those?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, it's commonly referred to as oak moth.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a native pest that we see. It's cyclical, so we see it every year. Some years are a little bit more intense than others, but yeah, it's a very common pest, and you see it affects several of the oak species that grow in Santa Barbara.
Okay, yeah, I've seen the adults at Oak Park, but I've never seen the really interesting splaying curtain of worms. Thank you. that brings us to our director's report.
Chair Clark and commissioners, a couple of things we'd like to bring to your attention. Number one, believe it or not, it's almost Labor Day. And Labor Day is another one of those weekends where people want to be out and enjoying family and fun and all sorts of activities. Given that, similar to the 4th of July, the City Council has determined that we will close our beaches for the Labor Day weekend in a similar manner that we did for the 4th of July weekend. What that means is beach parking lots will be closed with the exception of the harbor lot and access to Stearns Wharf. While people will be allowed to go to the beach and be on the beach, they will not be allowed to be sedentary, have sunbathing, picnicking, barbecues, or anything that would encourage group activities. So by taking these steps, you know, number one, beaches are super important. We've found even more so how important parks are during this pandemic for people to be able to get outside and to be able to do some sort of activity so that we want to be sure that people can still engage in active recreation. It's good for their physical shape, it's good for their emotional shape, it's good for everything as we address this pandemic. At the same time, we want to make sure we're continuing to keep Santa Barbarans as safe as possible, and everyone contribute to that. So we will have staffed up our beach lifeguards. We'll also be working with Harbor Patrol, Police Department, Fire Department, and we will have park rangers on staff, and then also our park staff. We don't usually have as much of a turnout for Labor Day as we usually do for 4th of July. But if it's a gorgeous weekend and it's as warm as it's been lately, people will want to be outside. So those are the steps that we'll take. And then I want to talk a little bit about always planning for the future. Even though we can't let anyone into our facilities, we need to get through this pandemic. Staff are working on ways in which to bring our facilities to people in their homes, creating video tours, working with a contractor, Wellborn Media, to do video tours of our beachfront facilities, including Cabrillo Pavilion, the Carousel House, Chase Palm Park Center, and Casa Las Palmas. There's a couple of things it'll enable us to do. It'll give people a vision of where they can go one day. It'll enable people to actually look at those spaces as perhaps they're planning an event in 2021. It'll reduce the need to do on-site tours for a little bit. And that will help with our customer service and really make us more accessible to people. We're not quite done yet, but we plan to show you those videos at hopefully your next commission meeting. So you'll be able to see them. They'll be posted on our website and then also on YouTube. So that's one way to do it. And then also, I've been working with the California Coastal Conservancy, State Coastal Conservancy, and some Chumash representatives for some time on a desire to take a look at Ambassador Park and find a way to perhaps do a better job of recognizing the Chumash heritage at that location. One of the first questions that the former director, Richard Johns, who hired me, asked was, do you know where Ambassador Park is? At the time I didn't, but now of course I do. So if anybody on the commission or public that's listening in, Ambassador Park is that small park on West Cabrillo Boulevard with the beautiful tall palm trees lining each side of the park. It is known as part of the original 6th Chumash settlement. It's called Ambassador Park because it's a remnant of the Ambassador Tract that included the Ambassador Hotel, which was originally constructed and called the Potter Hotel, which is what most people remember from history. That is this tiny little bit of land that was set aside for parkland, and the rest of that tract, as you know, was developed. So we've been working with the Coastal Conservancy and the Chumash representatives to come up with an approach to do something similar that we've done in our other park settings, where we convene community stakeholders, talk about some of the visions for the site, have a landscape design firm that's equipped to help us with that, and also draw up some preliminary design plans. And that's something that we would bring back to the commission. It's a project that would need approval by Historic Landmarks and ultimately blessing by the City Council. The project itself is funded through the State Coastal Conservancy, and it's actually a project that its genesis came out of some mitigation required not on city parkland, but in another location. And the desire from the Chumash representatives and stakeholders we've been working with is to actually do something in a place that is part of their heritage and their homeland. So I'm sharing this with you now without any details because there really aren't that much other than what's been written in your staff report, but we will be going to the City Council in September to allocate those funds to the project. And so I want to make sure the commission is aware of that before it occurs. And that concludes the remarks for the director's report.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Parks Department and City Council for their foresight in as much as the day. I'm a nurse, and everybody at Cottage has been running on, I might start crying. We've been running on adrenaline for the last 6 months, and it's been terrifying. And preventing a large influx of people that is going to stretch our resources and prevent us from being able to take care of our people it's really commendable. And I feel really grateful to live in a community that protects us. As much as we need tourism and we want tourism, we want people to come enjoy Santa Barbara, we also have to stay alive so we can serve those tourists. So thank you for doing that. It means a lot. Thanks. Did anyone else have any comments on the director's report? I'm also very excited about the Chumash Cultural Project. I think it's wonderful to do that mitigation work somewhere that matters to the Chumash. So thank you for that. And with that, if nobody has any more comments, we discussing proposed changes to special event permitting processes.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, Rich Hanna will be doing this presentation, and I think we need to switch, there we go, to the slides.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. Rich Hanna, Recreation Manager. I'll be joined today by Assistant City Attorney Robin Lewis. So if there's any questions as we go through this presentation, she'll be here to jump in and answer questions. So we're here today to talk about the proposed changes for special event permitting process. Because we're early in the process, we'll be looking to the Commission to provide recommendations as this moves forward closer towards implementation.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm driving my own PowerPoint today, so if there's a lag, it's specifically on me. So just before I get too far into the presentation tonight, this was a teamwork effort made up of an interdepartmental team, but more importantly, someone like Susan Jang Bartik, who had implemented this program with Parks and Recreation over a decade ago, inherited it from former staff, and now we have Sarah Knowles, who's our special event coordinator, and Annalisa Hoods, who works in the police department. They're the most directly involved with the special event permitting process. And we do have other department specialties that weigh in as the permit process moves forward, but I've relied mostly on those three staff to put this presentation together. So by way of background, the city permits on average 178 public special events each year. I did a quick dive into that. Parks and Recreation permits close to 115 annually, and the Santa Barbara Police Department permits roughly 63 events. And that doesn't include all the other events that the police department permit that not are part of the public special event permitting process. We do commercial and nonprofit sponsored events. So we're looking at athletic, community, cultural, parades, festivals, concerts, and block parties. We also have city sponsored and First Amendment events, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. One of the things that I think can be a little daunting is the permitting process can be complex, both internally because city staff want to make sure that events run safely for participants, spectators, and limit damage to city property. And for the event organizer, it can be overwhelming. It could be more costly than they thought it would be when they got into the permitting process. And at times there are other departments that are involved in the permitting process that are not part of the city of Santa Barbara, such as the health department or the alcohol beverage control ABC. So one of the key things we wanted to do as a team when we came out of the gate in this renovation of this policy was really define what a special event is. And in the past, we've listed a lot of different events, and I think event coordinators or organizers would look at those and say, well, this is where my event fits in, so I am a special event. And if it didn't exactly line up, there was times when they thought maybe they didn't have to go through this process. So we wanted to come out and clearly define exactly what a special event is. And it could include or require any of the following, whether they're using city property, so that could be parks, beaches, city buildings, whether there's road closures, use of public streets, transportation planning. So some of the large events in town that require shuttle service to and from, that would be an example of that, or even additional parking to support their event. Whether there's a need for security and or law enforcement. So obviously security being front and foremost for event organizers and their participants, whether it requires an entry ticket or participant fee. So these are more of the runs, the county triathlons, the awareness walk. So we put them into this. If you pay a fee to participate, then your event could be defined as a special event. And then we chose a number 75 or more attendees. So any one of these criteria could then move you into the special event permitting process. So mentioned earlier, the process can be a little cumbersome. So one of the things that we did initially was we went out and looked at what other cities were doing. So I looked at other coastal cities in California, including San Diego, Carlsbad, Santa Cruz, and Santa Monica, all of which have a rich history of putting on special events. I looked at a lot of what their standards were and how they were organized in terms of their outfacing material. I was pleasantly surprised to see that a lot of our guidelines aligned with things that they were already communicating to their residents or event organizers that were coming to their city to host events. I think the takeaway that I had was, they had simplified their guidelines, made it a little easier for an event organizer to move through that process. They had a dedicated web page or a location where all events went to, kind of a citywide process. And in addition to that, they just used technology outside of that to really enhance the experience for an event organizer. One of the other things we did when we were reviewing this process, we wanted to look at roles and internal communication. So as I mentioned before, this is a team effort, and you can't just be the one sole holder of all special event information in the city of Santa Barbara. Nobody's an expert on traffic control if you're in Parks and Recreation, or if you're in police, maybe you don't know about parks and where you can stake and impacts to irrigation lines. So we looked at clarifying those roles. We really wanted to enhance customer service and increase permit process efficiencies, and then reduce potential conflicts and impacts. And this is either a new event looking to put on an event somewhere in the waterfront, not recognizing that every Sunday there's the arts and crafts show, for example, so it's not going to be compatible, or an event that wants to be doing a run through the same neighborhood after the Night Move series had wrapped up the summer, and there's a little bit of this neighborhood fatigue. So we wanted to make sure that we were calling those things out early in the process so that we can obviously navigate them as we move through the special events. So out of this, we put together a series of meetings and discussions, mostly with these key departments, but there are other departments that participate in the special event permitting process. We wanted to define objectives. So how can we improve customer service and internal processes? Obviously evaluate and identify staff efficiencies. And then the other key one was the use of law enforcement, security services, and event volunteers, something that comes up frequently as somebody's moving through the special event permitting process. So what we started with is updating our special event guidelines. And oops, did my slide? Yep. Sorry, I'm just making sure my slides are reading correctly. So what we wanted to start with was updating the special event guidelines. The special event guideline that we had, when I first got my hands on it, it was about 64 pages. I think we're down to about 24 pages now. We took out a lot of duplicative information, things that were added into the guide to address very specific incidences that had come up with event directors that maybe tested the boundaries of the city. So we wanted to make sure that we updated the guidelines, and within inside of that, we also wanted to make sure we had 5 simple steps for every event organizer, so they could come in and see, okay, it's going to be these 5 steps, which may lead to other things that they need to do, but at least it's clear to them where they start and where they'll finish the process. We wanted to look at implementing standardized citywide processes. So we looked at a dedicated special event webpage, which I'll profile for you in a minute. And we also wanted to look at an online application process using Acela. And Acela is just a technological advancement. We're using it in other parts of the city to facilitate permitting and land use and other interdepartmental sharing of information. And because it's already being used by the city, we had the opportunity to add this module to it. And it's actually used for special event permitting in other cities. San Diego is using it, as well as City of Fort Lauderdale. So I've had the opportunity to go in and look at how that application process would work and how that would actually improve the experience for the person permitting their special event. So just by way of kind of simplifying the process, we will be putting together this type of a package. We're working with our IT department. This will kind of give you a sense of what the feel will be like for an event organizer coming in and starting to permit their application through the city of Santa Barbara. What I would tell you is this process is going to take several paths and may not be implementable until January of 2021. But as these advances come on, we'll be implementing them straight away. So as soon as the website's available and up and running, it's just a way to enhance the process for an event organizer before waiting till everything's complete. And the same as we add in the Acela. So we'll be having a dedicated website, something that drives people to this location. And then out of that, you'll see that there's buttons and ways for them to seek other information in the special event permitting process. Somebody that's new to the special event permitting process, we're going to have this special event guidelines, what they need to know. This is pretty much what our guidelines will look like. How to get started with permitting a special event in 5 simple steps. Again, just an easy way for somebody to digest this information without having to leave the website and go and dive into a set of guidelines that now is only 24 pages, but maybe you can get all the information you need from this website. And then just a way to help an event applicant and staff and anybody in the community get a sense of all the special events that are going on at the city at any one time. Using Acela will actually allow us to populate a calendar that is in real time. So people wanting to figure out if they can have an event on a certain day can see if there's already a conflicting event. And it's just a great tool to have that can be shared with the public, help with the event permitting process, and obviously help staff in terms of allocating resources. One of the other key things we wanted to focus on was the customer service and internal processes. And when I was reviewing other cities, they used a lot of workflow paths and where events move from the start through the finish. They also identified pretty much their top 4 types of events. And so you've got a returning event. They would go through a different workflow because they've already been in the city system. They've had a permit that's already been through there. So they've already got an experience of what the process is going to look like. A city sponsored event, again, similarly, but a city sponsored event, as I talk about further in the presentation, includes other resources that are made available to those events that the average returning or new event would not have access to. A first-time event, thinking of, if you're not familiar with this process, we want to have you engage with our special event coordinator first, directly as soon as the process is up and running. So that would lead them to an inquiry form where they can actually fill out their dates, the times, the events that they're thinking of, the scale, and then would prompt a call or communication with our special event coordinator. And once that's cleared up, then they would just move straight into the permitting system, similar to a returning event. And then first-time events are not always required to have a permit. Sometimes these events happen quickly based on developments in the world or locally. And our goal here, if nothing else, is if we can get an application that tells us the date, the time, the size, and the scope, we'll be better prepared to have city resources available. So a lot of these events, if you're familiar with Santa Barbara, start in De La Guerra Plaza, move out and move on to State Street. And so there's public safety considerations there, whether it's law enforcement or street closures. And so through this process, if somebody submits this application or notifies us on a Thursday, it's a simplified application, but it also then triggers an email out to all of the departments. So everybody's receiving the information in real time and can actually mobilize if we need to within 48 to 72 hours rather than bog it down in the process. We also wanted to standardize deadlines and approval processes. Some events that are large in scale will receive applications as far in advance as 2 years. We also will be permitting block parties and things like that, and we don't anticipate those coming in 10 to 12 months. In a perfect world, a large scale event, we're looking at no later than 6 months, which allows the applicant and the staff to get through the permitting process and have a safe event. And as I just mentioned, everything varies on approval based on the size and complexity of each specific event. So when we start talking about events in their own category, a returning events that I think of as Santa Barbara County Triathlon, Night Moves, the French and Greek festivals, awareness walks. One of the great developments of the Alisos software in this process is they'll have the ability to clone their previous application from the year before, or if they miss a year, the previous year, they can clone that application, update it for this current year, and essentially submit it right back into the system. And so it saves them a lot of steps and don't have to print things out and white things out. They can pretty much do it right there in the system and submit it back in. It would be its own new permit number, so it does not merge information from previous events, but it certainly expedites the process as they move through the event permitting steps. I talked earlier about city-sponsored events. There are events that are included in the city's Arts and Economic Vitality Program. The ones that come most to mind are Earth Day, Solstice, July 4th, Fiesta, Christmas Parade. These events also require, in addition to getting financial resources, also get in-kind city resources. And so when you think an event the size of Fiesta, you think of all the street closures and the barricades and the traffic control measures for State Street for the parades, the additional law enforcement, all the trash and recycling services. All of those resources are something that's required for a city-sponsored event. And so as this event moves through the permitting process, these types of resources will become available for them to identify, and staff will actually be able to cross-reference them against the resources that the city said they would provide. Anything that exceeds those resources would then be a cost to the city-sponsored event. Talked earlier about the first time event. So essentially we just want to help this person through the process, provide the best customer service we can. They can be unfamiliar with the permitting process, unaware of conflicts and impacts, and obviously if you become overwhelmed or confused or frustrated, you're probably going to pick up the phone anyway. So we just want to initiate that conversation right out of the gate. So as part of the website, there'll be a first-time event form. So it's essentially an intake way for us to have them put in their information, give us the size, date, location, scope. That would go to our special event coordinator. They'll review it, get back to the applicant, and as long as the date's available and they have a general sense of how to move through the rest of the permitting process, they would then just move into the process like any other event. And then the last event is the First Amendment event. These are an event for the purpose of expression. They're protected by the First Amendment. They're exempt from some of the special event permitting requirements. They're often submitted last minute. So again, some of these come in very last minute, but we have annual First Amendment rights. I think like the Women's March that come in every year, and they want other amenities at De La Guerra Plaza. And so if they're going to require electricity, or they're going to put a stage or have vendors, those types of things, there may be some special event requirements that would be placed upon them. But the typical First Amendment right, they're not obligated to actually submit a permit at all. And again, what we're ultimately trying to get out of this is the location, date, time, size, and scale, and that will determine the city resources we need to provide. So moving through how to make this customer friendly and enhance that experience, we also wanted to look at staff efficiencies across the city organization. We wanted to look at obviously the amount of workflow, but also, you know, avoiding multiple calls and multiple emails. How can we standardize that? And Acela will allow us to keep notes and comments both through the permitting process and post-event that staff can look at throughout the way, which should cut down on the amount of work staff have to engage in across different departments. To really be efficient in this process, we needed a lead department. So the Parks and Recreation Department will serve as the lead department for all citywide special events. And Sarah Knowles, our special events coordinator, essentially will be the quarterback that then drives out the permit flow to the other departments. We also wanted to maintain respective department roles. A lot of departments play a critical role in the special event permitting process. But that's not their only function. Even Sarah Knowles, who's our special event coordinator, assists with photo and film permits and helps out with outdoor facility rentals. You know, the fire department that weigh in on egress for emergency situations and issue tent permits if that's required for special events. They're also fire inspectors. So everybody has these critical roles within the city. We wanted to maintain them. But at the same time, we wanted to have a centralized department. So again, Parks and Recreation would do that. And then I've touched on the benefits of Acela. It would standardize the application and permitting process citywide, allows us to view information internally. We can store post-event action notes and share that both with the event organizer or internally. One of the other key functions with Acela from the development side that we've been going through and what I saw with the city of Fort Lauderdale is as you're going through the application process, you cannot pass a certain question if you decide to skip it. So it requires somebody to at least try to complete the application in full and not allow staff to then have to make multiple contacts with the event organizer to figure out the details. It also has the ability to have some logic thinking in it. So if a question was to be raised, do you plan on having tents at your event? And are they going to be greater than a 10 by 10, which is a standard pop-up tent you would see at a camp? If you were to check yes, a pop-up box would come up and say, this may require a special event permit from the fire department. So you don't have to complete this application and then go, well, nobody told me about this fire department permit. Now I got to go verify that against the guidelines. So there's a lot of benefits to using something like Acela, both for the applicant, but also internally inside the city organization. The other thing that we looked at was the use of law enforcement, security services, and volunteers. The team needed to evaluate the needs for these services. Often they can be costly. And so one of the things that I have heard with event organizers in the past is, you know, when I'm required to have special or law enforcement participate in my event, they're usually off-duty officers. That comes at a certain charge. So we wanted to look at that and move that through the process and really evaluate that. And a couple of key things that came out of that is we did determine that the Santa Barbara Police Department already looks at every event on a case-by-case basis. They look at the opportunity to work with event organizers to have supplemental or augment law enforcement services with private security or event attendees or event volunteers. So a lot of that's already going on where they can actually scale that back out and make it more costly or cost effective for an event organizer. We also determined that the law enforcement here in Santa Barbara play a critical role. There's a lot of times that law enforcement is requested because event organizers want to have that level of safety at their event. It can be a deterrent for potential illegal activity. They also play a critical role within the emergency management system. So if they're on a traffic blockade on Cabrillo Boulevard for the Santa Barbara County Triathlon and there's a major incident, they're automatically connected into the EMS system. They can get emergency services there. They can pull in other staffing resources as needed, and they can really help ensure staff and safety, participants, safety, and then risk mitigation for the city as a whole. So as we've gone through this entire process, I'm happy to report that the cost to implement something like this aren't as high as some people would imagine. So the city currently uses Acela, and I'd referenced some of the departments earlier in the presentation, but here are the departments that are currently using Acela. The special event software cost, the development is $10,000. There's multiple departments that participate in this, so that is a cost share. So each department would be paying just over $1,400 as a one-time cost to implement the software. And then the licensing, took me by surprise. It's a little expensive. There's a lot of licenses that already exist in the department. There's licenses that are in departments that are not utilized at the level. So there's a discussion right now about moving certain licenses to the right people that will participate in the special event permitting. But if the department does not have a license, that's an additional $3,000 cost per additional license. And that's an annual cost. And that's just to have access to all of the Acela. If other applications of Acela come online, that license can be used across all of their applications. So it's not just a license just to use the special event software. And then in terms of timeline, we're here today to present to the Parks and Recreation Commission. The department was already working on updating the special event policies and guidelines a while ago, significantly a while ago, but we were getting through this process, and then as part of the budget process at City Council, special events was mentioned. So there's a presentation going to the Finance Committee on September 15th with other items that were asked to be brought back to Council. This will be included in that. We'll be looking to go to Ordinance Committee and City Council somewhere in October. We will be notifying event organizers as all of these events come up, but we'll definitely be making a larger push as we get into November and helping people really just transition into this new way of permitting special events, and then looking for a full implementation January 2021. And hopefully by then we can have large special events, but it wouldn't be uncommon for people to start planning to permit an event, something like Fiesta, for example, in August of 2021. They may be wanting to start using some of the Acela software and some of these benefits as early as October or even November. And so the recommendation tonight is that the commission provide recommendations on the proposed changes to the permitting process for citywide special events. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, and we can go from there. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Excellent presentation, very informative. Do we have questions for Mr. Hanna? My first question was, I was a little bit confused on the cost, and would it solely be the Parks Department that is charged the additional $10,000 the development implementation, or will all of the departments that utilize Acela contribute to the cost of development implementation of the permitting process?
Chair Clark and commissioners, that's a great question. Sorry. The total cost for development is $10,000. Each department will have a cost share. So Parks and Recreation will only be required to spend $1,400 to have this functionality.
Okay. Thank you. While I'm waiting for other people to show their face with their questions, I had a small question. So if someone was having a wedding at the Cabrillo Ballroom and Pavilion that was 75 people, would that qualify it to be a special event? And then if it was qualified to be a special event, would it pop onto that citywide calendar? So when people are looking for dates to hold their events, they would see, oh, I can't go there this weekend because.
Sure. Chair Clark and commissioners, that's a good question. So the focus of this is public special events. So most of those occur outdoors and involve those other city resources. What I can tell you is there are indoor events that are over 75 people that by the sheer nature of your event may trigger some additional permitting requirements depending on some of the amenities you may want to have at your wedding or your reception, but we would handle that through our indoor facility permitting process. The great thing about Parks and Recreation being the lead for the special event policies and procedures is we also manage all the indoor special events. And so we're very aware of weddings and special events and making the event organizer aware of that, and also a wedding or a reception. And we've dealt with that many years for the Santa Barbara County Triathlon, where we've had them close their event and be cleaned up in the parking lot by noon to allow a wedding reception to come in and use the pavilion on the Sunday evening.
Okay, great. That answers my question. Other questions? So when you're asking, oh, Vice Chair McGill.
That's okay. Keep you started. Go ahead.
No, I was just waiting.
So I guess my question is the timing and in the 6 to 12 months, if you do minimum to kind of standard, is that consistent with what you would say best in classes with other cities? And then kind of a related question, if and from a customer point of view, is there someone out there from a city, a municipality that stands out as a best in class?
Chair McGill and Commissioner McGill, Chair Clark, and commissioners. So 6 to 12 months is really the norm of what we're seeing. I mean, most events, when you're talking about the resources that are required, that's an adequate amount of time. And depending on how quickly the event organizer then moves through their requirements as part of the conditional event permitting process, can also shorten that. There are times where we've had events come in at the very last minute, and depending on city resources, we can process those. But best practice is 6 months to a year in terms of entering into this system for a public special event. In terms of looking at an industry leader or somebody that I, through my research, would kind of say that's something we'd want to benchmark ourselves on. I think the City of San Diego's special event website is something that we're mirroring in terms of how it functions and how it serves as a great resource for event organizers. Their Acela application portal, I guess, is down at this time. They had a very complicated Acela process that also include notification to federal agencies and other things just based on their proximity to a naval base. And so they're reworking through that. But I would say out of all the agencies that I looked at, I would say we're benchmarking after the City of San Diego. And then I also thought that there was a lot of things that the City of Santa Cruz had that also helped with the process. So we're using some of those things, but we're really basing it on the City of San Diego.
Thanks.
I was wondering, Mr. Hanna, if the development and implementation of a new special event permitting process will be affected by the changes in our lifestyle due to COVID. Is the department obviously going to be incorporating health and safety changes into their permitting requirements, or is it too early to tell what the future is going to look like? I'm sure there's been discussion. I'm just wondering where you guys are with that.
Sure. Chair Clark and
challenges.
commissioners. Yeah, sure. Chair Clark and commissioners. So, I mean, we're in a very unique situation with a lot of different guidelines that are changing very frequently. I think where there's been best practices that have occurred or come up through the COVID process, I think we'll start seeing when we're working through the special event permitting process with environmental services, for example, or the health department. And so some of those agencies may be requiring or changing their requirements on a special event applicant that we would be honoring and then taking those requirements and placing them on a special event organizer to host their event. In terms of size and I guess social distancing and those types of things, I think it's very preliminary, too early to answer those questions. I think a lot of the events that we do host, when you think of them, are festivals and parades and athletic events, and just by their sheer nature, things like social distancing and face coverings would be difficult. But as we've gone further into this COVID pandemic, I think it shows how quickly events, city organizations, agencies, and the public can kind of swivel on a dime and actually implement changes. And so there will be provisions in there for federal, state, and local emergencies that would allow some flexibility in the permitting process, but no specific parameters to address that at this time, no.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or questions at this moment, I suppose, because this is for action. Vice Chair McGill.
Yeah, just one last one. And just the First Amendment permit, which I can see situations where that would be, I guess, sensitive. How does that work now?
Vice Chair McGill, commissioners, I will start with this process, and I may have the City Attorney Robin Lewis jump in. But from a permitting process right now, we do not get an application. Often we have staff that hear about it because it's on social media. We may be fortunate enough that somebody reaches out to us and says, we're planning on using De La Guerra Plaza. We want to use that as a staging area. That's really our only engagement in the process. Prior to the start of this review and proposed changes, our special event application, regardless of the size of your event, required about a 6-page application process. Many of those items were not required. We've got it down to a simple 1-page application with the hope that First Amendment rights will use that. So currently there is no formal process. We've been trying to formalize that. Again, it's not required, but we are trying to make sure we have the best information to make sure the events go off safe for participants and spectators.
Yeah, I mean, the sensitivity I see is, is that just the word application implies approve or deny, when in fact we're talking about a constitutional right.
Vice Chair McGill, you're correct. I would actually defer to Assistant City Attorney Robin Lewis at this point.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark and commissioners. While we don't currently have what we're trying to put into place right now, the law is out there, and so when these events come up, the department is following the law. We are fortunate that there are cases that have specifically addressed a lot of issues in the special events permitting process. For instance, Santa Monica went through a lawsuit years ago, and the case that resulted from that has provided us with a lot of guidance on the First Amendment issues. So a lot of the things that we have put into the guidelines and that we will eventually put into the into a new ordinance are practices, are best practices that we are currently using. So the law right now is, a layer on top of whatever the existing policies are. Once we get the special events guidelines enacted, then they'll be more obvious to the community. The community will be on notice. So the First Amendment comes into play here because anytime you have an advanced registration requirement, it has the risk of burdening free speech. And the courts have put many requirements on that. For instance, the 75 persons requirement came out of a Ninth Circuit case that, said that you don't need to require permits for less than 75. So I hope that answers your question, Commissioner McGill.
Yeah, from a legal point of view, I'm just concerned that this is managed in such a way that the potential users of it don't see it as a limitation to freedom of assembly and freedom of speech.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, Yes, and there's several provisions in there, like for instance, the waiver of insurance and indemnification as a possibility. They do have to interact with the city staff, but that's pretty much a necessary component anyway, because we have to be prepared with whatever resources are necessary to help their event be safe. You know, I think we have many provisions that also the advance notice requirement, you know, you were talking about the 6-month provision earlier. Well, that's not a requirement for First Amendment events. For yearly events, we will try to get them to participate because they can show that they already know about the need to reserve a space. But any financial burdens, things such as that, they can make a showing that it would, if they had to comply with those requirements, they couldn't have the event, and then those requirements would be waived.
Okay, thank you.
So if a group wanted to assemble tomorrow in De La Guerra Plaza and did so without notifying the city or filling out indemnification paperwork, is that legal in the city's viewpoint?
Yes, I mean, we are trying, the brief form that was created is an opportunity for us to know about it and get resources, but it's not illegal for people to assemble in a location.
Yeah. Chair Clark and commissioners, I think the simple answer is yes, somebody can go ahead and do that. I think the more the city's aware of those situations, we can have resources that are in place at no cost to the event organizer to make sure that the event goes off successfully and safely for everybody in the community, whether you're participating in the event or you're a downtown business or you just happen to be a spectator.
So the city acts more as a like a safety facilitator and a supporter of the event by protecting
Correct.
the public, and that's the intent of the special event permitting, is to be able to support these gatherings, not dissuade them. I think, Kathy, maybe that's where you're headed.
Yeah, that's where I'm heading, and also I'm heading in something that, for something like this, in my mind, a website link, or somewhere there needs to be a way of moving beyond the website so that it's actually a reach out and an engagement and a conversation, perhaps initiated, not necessarily by the event organizer, because one thing, these things can come up pretty quickly. But it's a different kind of conversation than solstice and fiesta and marathons and things like that. And I think it perhaps requires a different kind of outreach and engagement. And Excella may not be the absolute answer to this, though it's a perfectly good process.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, sometimes we hear about these events from, on the news. And exactly. So park staff have reached out in many cases to those events organizers in order to facilitate collaboration on these events. So, I mean, you're right. It is a very different process.
Yeah, I mean, I've got this kind of mental image of something horrible's happened. The population is welling up over, I don't know, a shooting, and we don't want our response to be, okay, great, here, fill out this form, please.
But it would be like, okay, great. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I think we're saying, yes, you're absolutely right. And I think the point is there are times where we would know in advance because there is a First Amendment event, and we've already worked with folks in the past. The fact that, you know, we hear about it on the news or somebody sends an email, what often happens is there's a flurry of phone calls and emails and scrambling in between departments, which we'll still have to do on occasion for sure, because that's our job. And we realize that, is that where we can find ways to make sure that the communication lines are open and coordination is open and our ability to work with the public is as successful as possible. And I think that's really what we're always striving for. So invariably there will be times where, you know, it's like, oh no, you know, it's not like, oh, go fill this out right now. I mean, we're very flexible. We go with whatever we need to do. But we do need a process that helps us function as an organization, and also a process that helps communicate with organizers. Hopefully that's somewhat useful.
Thank you.
Chair Clark and commissioners, I think that the guidelines are, you know, not going to cover every situation, just like they also aren't going to cover the COVID issues. But COVID is really governed by orders outside of our administrative regulations. So, you know, I think the commissioners are correct in identifying that Acela is not going to work for those situations, but, you know, staff is prepared to deal with that outside of Acela.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Do any of the commissioners that haven't made comments have anything to say about the proposed changes to the special event permitting process? Okay, so are you looking in terms of recommendations, because this is for action, just general support or approval to go forward with the implementation development? I'm not quite sure what, in terms of recommendations, do you want our comments and feedback, or do you want action, like approval to go forward with the implementation development, or support that can be communicated to City Council?
Chair Clark and commissioners, I think if the commission feels comfortable supporting that the direction this process is moving with the proposed changes, that would be something that we'd be looking to the commission to include in this. And then obviously if there's items that you would want to call out specifically, we'd want to have that noted as well.
Okay, Ms. Zachary?
Chair Clark, I would just concur with what Rich Hanna said. It's really the commission's opportunity to hear this work effort, and we will be going to council, and we'd like to be able to share with council that you reviewed the recommendations and are hopefully in concurrence with the direction we're going.
Yeah. Okay. My comments are, I feel like this really complex process of getting an event up and going and safe with the interdepartmental cooperation requires to have something be safe and successful is going to be supported and facilitated with the new special event permitting process. I do understand Vice Chair McGill's comment that perhaps for marches and protests that Acela might not be the best vehicle to get these things permitted, but I think it's better than nothing. And people do have the right to free speech and to assemble in public places, but they also have the right to be safe and have police and fire and environmental services aware of gatherings, if possible, to maintain a safe environment. I am sure that more work is going to be done on this, and in recognition of Chair McGill's Vice Chair McGill's concerns and my own, I think if there's, I like what Kathy said about outreach, and I think having a point person, a very public point person on Facebook, I don't know if that would be Ms. Knowles, who would respond to organizers respond to events on the news and Facebook and Instagram with like an acknowledgement of the importance of the event and people's free speech, and along with the presentation of these resources. Like you can apply for this permit and it's for you. It's to support your work and it's to support your voice. I think if you can also look into really marketing a point person for people who are trying to gather and assemble, that would be wonderful. Those are my recommendations and comments. Would anybody else like to speak?
If I may.
Commissioner Perry, please. And please,
Rich,
please
fabulous.
turn on your webcam.
I'm sorry. I just lost.
It's okay. There you are. Nope, we got you.
Very good. I would like to commend Rich Anna on a fabulous presentation. Very thorough, very complete, and it seems to be very, very well streamlined. You know, as for the concerns, it's been my past experience with working with the city that they have a system set up that is so thorough that they know what's going to go on before the media knows what's going to go on. I don't think we really have a concern about pop-up events coming and going without some foresight. And I think Ms. Zachary or Rich could speak to this. I was doing things with the city. I was absolutely floored at how they were ahead of the curve with potential controversy.
Commissioner Perry and Chair Clark.
Thank you.
We have a great team. I you know, between the police department and Parks and Recreation, there are a lot of events that are out there. There's events that get advertised in the Independent that staff look through every Thursday, and then we make sure that we engage with those individuals. And if nothing else, we notify our park rangers and make sure that, you know, at least they're aware of if this event takes place in the future, they would need to secure a permit. So yes, I feel like we're very in tune. I do understand the sensitivity around the First Amendment, right, or the First Amendment events and the securing of a permit. And I do believe that our staff are already akin to both social media and other ways that these events are being notified. And there's no reason that if we're not currently doing it at a level, we couldn't improve the way we engage with those event organizers to at least make them aware of the processes. And if they choose not to, we've at least had a conversation with that, and we could send an internal email to the other city departments, making them aware of an event on a certain day and avoid the ACELA process altogether.
Commissioner Martinez-Cohen.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to make a couple comments. I think this was a really good presentation. I think this process is really welcomed. I've heard some mixed feedback in the community about the fees and the process for setting up a special event is kind of changing and sometimes can be a moving target. And so I think streamlining this process especially is going to be really important for a lot of the long-standing events, and just to help folks know what to expect a little bit more from ahead of time. So that's one aspect. And then, you know, on the free speech sort of side of it, I'm on the board of the Women's Political Committee, and we do lots of events and marches and organizations. And so I know everyone, I mean, at least on our side, when we're gonna do a big, you know, rally or event, we're always in communication, making sure that we're getting the permit or doing the insurance requirements or getting the police presence there that we need or whatever it is. So I would say that that to me is not as much of a concern. Again, this, like, the organization has done many marches, and I think, you know, people who are doing a big event know what they need to do as far as the process, or they're collaborating with organizations like WPC that know what needs to be done to hold a peaceful, successful sort of public demonstration. So that's just my feedback, just from being on the inside of it or on the other side of it, I guess you could say, and knowing what it does take to organize those types of events. So I just think this is a good process. I think this was needed. And I think that there was, you know, definitely some confusion out there about the fees and when and what and which department and all of this. And so I really welcome this process. I think it will help folks.
All right, thank you. So it sounds like you're getting positive recommendations from myself and Commissioner Perry's, Martine Cohen, and Vice Chair McGill. Is anybody else like to speak? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hanna.
Thank you.
And that brings us, nobody else has any more comments, to our adjournment. Thank you for coming.